Last year I spent £3,000 on cake. Not restaurants, not eating out, not groceries, cake. I didn't really know this until I went through my bank account and started adding it up. There were over 200 transactions. £8 here, £15 here, 20 quid on Friday night, over £50 a week. And the weirdest part is that at the time I considered myself a really healthy person. I ate mostly whole foods, lots of fruit and vegetables. I cut out almost all of the processed foods. I exercised. I weigh myself every day. I was obsessed with health, longevity, and trying to feel as good as possible. And then, almost every day, I go and buy an enormous slab of cake, or 4. I managed to convince myself these two things were completely compatible, and they weren't. And looking back, some of my behaviour around cake was completely ridiculous. At one point, I was going into the same supermarket about 3 times a week to buy one thing, a tub of extra thick cream. Nothing else. I'd walk in, buy my cream and walk out. I did it so often that the staff started recognising me. God knows what they thought I was doing with all this cream. But the supermarket wasn't even the destination. It was just next door to the cake shop. And this couldn't just be any cake. I'd reached the dangerous stage where I'd tell myself, if I'm going to eat cake, I'm going to eat good cake. Which is exactly what happened to me with my wine problem. I used to spend £6 or £7 a bottle, and eventually that became £20 a bottle, because if I was going to do that, I was going to do it right. Because if I was going to do something that wasn't particularly good for me, apparently buying a more expensive version made it sophisticated. So these cakes were ridiculous. Huge, thick tray bakes covered in Biscoff, Kinder Bueno, chocolate, icing, whatever they could physically stick to them. And I loved them. Or at least I thought I did. Because eventually I started noticing something. I wasn't actually enjoying this anymore. I turned cake into a reward, and this was probably the biggest trap. I'd have a productive day. I'd earn some cake. I'd finish a difficult job. Get some cake. Something good happened. Let's get some cake. And if absolutely nothing happened, I still got the cake. The most ridiculous one involved my weight, and I'd weigh myself every morning. If I'd lost a couple of pounds, I'd think, brilliant, I can have cake. So I'd lose weight, reward myself with a tray bake, put the weight back on, and then start again. I had essentially invented a reward system where the price for achieving my goal was undoing my goal, and I considered this discipline. Sometimes I'd go into the shop and spend so much that the woman behind the counter asked what the special occasion was. Nope, no special occasion, it's just a Thursday. And she'd say, well, you've got to treat yourself. And I used to say exactly the same thing all the time. You've got to treat yourself. But eventually I started wondering, have you? Says who? And why was my idea of a treat something that gave me a few minutes of pleasure followed by feeling absolutely terrible afterwards? Why wasn't a treat something that improved my life? Why wasn't it a new book, something for the garden, or going somewhere with the children? Putting the money towards something I actually wanted long term. Because £10 or £15 doesn't feel particularly significant when you're standing in a shop, but repeat it more than 200 times and suddenly you've spent £3,000 on cake. That's a holiday, that's a decent chunk of somebody's mortgage, and that's a gym membership and a pile of books and days out with the family. I had taken thousands of pounds and literally scoffed it away. The money bothered me, but it wasn't actually the reason I stopped. I stopped because I realised how much control I'd given this thing. Towards the end, I wasn't even excited about going to get it. I'd walk towards the shop knowing exactly what was going to happen. I'd eat far too much. I'd feel exhausted afterwards. I'd become irritable. Sometimes I'd be sitting there struggling to keep my eyes open with my heart racing. And yet the next day, I wanted to do it all again. It affected the family as well. I was the one constantly bringing this stuff into the house. So even if everyone else wouldn't have gone looking for cake, Dad was turning up with another enormous box of it. And I started thinking, what exactly am I teaching my children here? That every good day needs sugar attached to it? That every celebration needs food? That feeling bored is a reason to eat? That treating yourself means doing something that actually makes you feel terrible afterwards? I didn't like that. And eventually the whole thing started feeling absurd. So I quit. I'd said, this is the last time loads of times. And every time I'd last a day or two. Then my brain would begin negotiations. You've been good. Just have it the weekend. You don't need to quit completely. Everything in moderation. One piece isn't going to kill you. And individually, all of those arguments sound completely reasonable. The problem was, I didn't eat one piece of cake in moderation. I proved that around 200 times. So eventually I stopped negotiating and I stopped buying it. And because cake was really the last major source of added sugar in my diet, I decided to stop eating added sugar at the same time. And here's the bit that surprised me. I thought I'd miss it for much longer than I did. For about a week, I really wanted cake, and then I didn't. That was it. The thing that I put on a pedestal for years, the thing I genuinely couldn't imagine not eating, became something I barely think about. And I've experienced this with so many habits. Before you stop, your brain tells you, how am I supposed to live without this? After enough time has passed, you start thinking, how did I live like that? And quite a few things changed. We stopped spending £50 a week on cake. I felt better after meals. I felt more patient. I stopped being the person constantly bringing huge amounts of sugary food in the house. Family days out changed as well. This sounds stupid, but we go somewhere nice and part of my brain would always be thinking, where can I get some cake? The cake had somehow become the event. Now we go somewhere and the place we're visiting is the event. Looking back, I don't think this story is actually about cake. Cake was just my thing. Before that, it was wine. At another point, it was pizza. I've even managed to become slightly obsessive about sourdough bread and kombucha, so apparently I can turn almost anything into a vice. But most of us probably have something. The coffee you automatically buy every morning, the takeaway every Friday, alcohol, snacks, whatever it is. Something we stopped consciously choosing and started doing automatically. And because it's £5 here or £10 there, we never zoom out far enough to see what the behaviour actually looks like. I didn't, until I added up £3,000, and that number forced me to ask a much more useful question. Not, can I afford this? Not, is one piece of cake really that bad? But is this actually making my life better? For me, the answer was no, so I stopped. And strangely, the thing I once thought I couldn't live without is now something I can't imagine wanting to start again. If you're interested in the sugar side of this rather than the money, watch this video next, because I go into what happened when I stopped eating added sugar, and some of the results genuinely surprised me.